The sun hung low in the sky, casting long shadows over the dusty main street of Mayfield. The heat shimmered above the cracked earth like a mirage, and the air felt thick with unspoken judgments. Ezekiel Marsh stood beneath the weathered awning of Maddox's general store, the contract crumpled in his pocket, weighing heavier than the iron latch on his barn door. "Marry 'em both," he muttered under his breath, glancing toward the open door of the store. There stood Magnolia Maddox, a formidable presence despite her size, arranging fabric bolts with deft fingers. He hadn't known her well. She kept mostly to the shadows of the store, always behind the counter, quietly stitching her world together. Today, though, her chin was lifted as she counted bolts, the sunlight catching the gold flecks in her brown eyes. Something in that moment twisted in his gut. "You're a long way from home, Ezekiel," Magnolia said, her voice steady but low, as if sensing his turmoil before he spoke it. He stepped closer, his boots scuffing against the wooden floorboards. "What do you know of it, Magnolia? They'll think I'm a fool, marrying two women no one else wants." "I don't see fools when I look at you," she replied, glancing up from her work, her dark hair catching the light. "I see a man with nothing left to lose." She paused, letting her words settle. "You're making a choice, just like we are." Ezekiel rubbed the back of his neck, feeling the sweat trickle down. "You think there's honor in this?" Magnolia met his gaze, the warmth of her expression cooling under the weight of reality. "Honor isn't given. It's earned. You think any man in this town cares about you or your choices. They want to see you fall. But if you choose to rise, you can rise together." A voice broke in, and Willa Blaine stepped into the store, the afternoon sun illuminating her auburn hair like a halo. She held herself tall, her dress a faded green that hugged her curves, defying the town's whispers that tried to erase her worth. "That's what this is, Ezekiel. An opportunity for all three of us. We aren't just figures in a contract." He looked between them, the tension thick enough to slice. "You both think this is some kind of salvation? That by marrying me, you'll find respect?" Willa's gaze hardened. "Respect? Is that what you think we want?" "No, Ezekiel. We want a voice. We want the chance to carve our names into our own lives." Her fists clenched at her sides, and he could see the conviction etched in her brow. "Or, would you rather we remained the town's joke, a pair of lost women tethered to a desperate man?" There was a silence, heavy with possibility, punctuated only by the creaking floor and the distant clinking of horseshoes against the cobblestones outside. Ezekiel glanced away, the weight of their words crashing over him like a wave. "I didn't expect this," he began, but Willa stepped closer, her voice low, fierce. "You should expect strength," she said, her eyes fierce and unyielding. "Strength in partnership, strength in choice. If you're going to bind yourself to us, then commit to knowing who we are, not just the names on a paper." His heart thundered against his ribcage, the winds of change swirling around them, carrying a hint of the storm to come. "And if I can't?" "Then you choose to walk away, leaving us to fend for ourselves," Magnolia said softly. "But you won't, because deep down, you know you need us, just like we need you." Ezekiel inhaled sharply, the truth lacing through the silence like a snake in the grass. It wasn't just about survival. It was about something deeper, something that stirred in him, a flicker of hope that he hadn't dared to acknowledge. "Tonight, then," he said, his voice a whisper against the dust-filled air. "Tonight we'll talk this through, not as strangers, but as partners." Willa's posture shifted, the rigidity in her shoulders relaxing, just a fraction. "A dinner, then. But know this, it'll be a test for all of us." "Agreed," Magnolia replied, the ghost of a smile creeping onto her lips. "And it starts with honesty." As they stepped out of the store into the warmth of the late afternoon sun, Ezekiel felt a resolve solidifying in his chest. The town around him felt different, as if the very ground was shifting beneath his feet. Maybe this wasn't merely a desperate gamble. Perhaps it was the beginning of something worth standing for. In that moment, as the three of them stood side by side, the setting sun bathed them in golden light, illuminating the path ahead, one that teetered on the edge of uncertainty, but glimmered with promise. Ezekiel took a deep breath, glancing over at Magnolia and Willa. "Let's make it count." With that, they began to walk toward the ranch, a thread weaving them together, binding them in ways none of them could yet fully comprehend. The weight of their choices loomed like a shadow, but with each step they pressed forward into the unknown. The ranch loomed in the distance, its weathered barn standing proudly against the backdrop of the sprawling sky, a canvas brushed with hues of orange and purple. The air smelled of hay and earth, a familiar comfort that tugged at Ezekiel's heartstrings. A flicker of movement caught his eye. A family of rabbits darted across the path, their innocent scurrying a reminder of the wild freedom they all longed for. "Did you ever think it would come to this?" he asked, his voice quiet as they walked. Willa chuckled softly, the sound almost melodic against the chirping crickets. "I'd be lying if I said I hadn't dreamed of something more. A life where we could choose our own destinies, not dictated by the whims of men." Magnolia nodded, her gaze fixed on the horizon. "And yet, here we are, three misfits thrown together by circumstance. It seems fate has a twisted sense of humor." She plucked a wildflower from the edge of the path, twirling it between her fingers like a fragile promise. "Fate has a way of giving us what we need," Ezekiel replied, his thoughts drifting back to the weight of the contract that lingered over them like a storm cloud. "But we have to meet it halfway." They stepped onto the wooden porch of the ranch, the boards creaking underfoot, a tune that spoke of years gone by and secrets held within the walls. Willa paused at the door, her hand resting against the frame. "You know, we could tear this place apart and build something new," she said, her eyes sparkling with a mix of mischief and hope. "No more shadows, no more whispers, just us." Magnolia's smile widened, the wildflower still dancing in her grip. "A sanctuary, then. We'd fill it with laughter, not just the echoes of despair." Ezekiel felt a warmth bloom in his chest, an unfamiliar kind of joy that fluttered just beneath the surface. "And what if it all falls apart?" "Then we rebuild," Willa said, her confidence unwavering. "That's what strength is, Ezekiel. It's not the absence of fear, but the courage to stand despite it." He studied their faces, both resolute in their visions of a future that was theirs to mold. "All right," he said slowly, the words tasting new on his tongue. "Let's do it. Let's turn this ranch into our refuge." With that declaration, he pushed the door open, the hinges groaning like the old bones of the building. The interior was simple, yet inviting. sunlight streaming through dusty windows and illuminating the wooden table at the center. It was a blank canvas, waiting for their stories to be written upon it. As they stepped inside, the air seemed to shift, charged with the potential of their plans. Ezekiel felt the weight of the world lift, replaced by a shared purpose that pulsed between them. In that moment, as they stood in the heart of the ranch, the three of them were no longer just individuals bound by circumstance. They were a tapestry, woven from threads of hope, strength, and the promise of a tomorrow built together. "Let's start with dinner," Magnolia suggested, breaking the silence with a smile. "And after that, the plans," Willa grinned, her eyes gleaming with mischief. "And perhaps a toast to our reckless bravery." Ezekiel chuckled, the sound echoing off the walls as they moved deeper into their new reality, ready to embrace the challenges ahead. For the first time in a long while, he felt the stirring of something profound, a connection that could withstand whatever storms lay on the horizon. The scent of the old wood mingled with the faint trace of smoke from a chimney that had long been dormant, awakening memories of warmth and laughter from yesteryear. Willa pushed past a crooked chair, its legs uneven on the floorboards, and she leaned against the table, her fingers tracing the knots in the wood as if reading a story etched into its grain. "You know, this table has seen better days," she mused, her voice low. "But it can hold more than just meals. It could hold our dreams." Magnolia moved to a window, peering out at the fields that had once flourished under the care of hands, now long gone. "Those crops aren't the only things that could thrive again," she whispered, as if sharing a secret with the fading light. "If we give them the chance." Ezekiel stepped closer to her, drawn by the intensity of her gaze. "What if we planted something new? Not just food, but life?" He reached for the wildflower in her hand, a delicate burst of color against the earth tones surrounding them, and carefully tucked it behind her ear. "Something that reminds us what we're fighting for." She smiled, a soft blush creeping into her cheeks. "A garden, then? A place where we can nurture our dreams while we wait for the world to catch up?" "Exactly," he said, his voice gaining strength. "A place where every seed represents a piece of us." Willa rolled her eyes playfully. "And what if the crows come, or a drought hits?" "Then we find a way to protect it," Ezekiel countered, an edge of determination in his tone. "Just like we'll protect each other." The kitchen, cluttered with remnants of past lives, rusty pots hanging from hooks, a chipped ceramic bowl filled with dust, seemed to echo their resolve. The sunlight poured in, catching motes of dust that danced like tiny stars in the fading light, and for a moment the clutter transformed into something sacred, a mosaic of potential waiting to be unearthed. Magnolia's laughter rang out, bright and clear, breaking the tension like a glass shattering against stone. "We'll need a plan, but let's not forget about the fun. I say we start with a feast, a celebration of our newfound purpose." "Fine by me," Willa said, her eyes alight with enthusiasm. "But we're going to need some supplies. Who knows what lies in the pantry?" Ezekiel felt a flutter of excitement at the thought of diving into the past. It could be a treasure trove, or a nightmare, he joked, earning a chuckle from both women. He opened a rickety cupboard, the door protesting with a screech, revealing a collection of mismatched dishes and jars filled with herbs, long dried, their fragrance still lingering, like whispers from another time. "Here's hoping we don't find anything too rotten," Willa teased, pulling out a jar that rattled ominously. She shook it, and a small cloud of dust erupted, prompting them all to cough and laugh, the sound echoing off the walls and mingling with their shared dreams. "Whatever we find, we'll make it work," Ezekiel said firmly, a sense of camaraderie enveloping them. Together. As they rummaged through the remnants, the fading daylight painted the room in hues of gold and amber, transforming the old ranch into a sanctuary of rebirth. Outside, the wind picked up, rustling the leaves of the nearby oak tree, a silent witness to their unfolding story. Each laughter-filled moment stitched them closer, the threads of their pasts intertwined with the vibrant future they were beginning to weave. "Magnolia! Hold that thought!" Willa exclaimed, her eyes catching the glint of something shiny beneath a pile of faded linens. She crouched down and pulled out an old tin box, its surface tarnished, but the latch surprisingly intact. "Looks like we might have hit the jackpot here." "What do you think's inside?" Magnolia asked, curiosity dancing in her voice. "Only one way to find out," Ezekiel said, stepping closer, his eyes sparkling like the fading light outside. "Let's see what secrets this place has kept." Willa fumbled with the latch, her heart racing as it clicked open, revealing a collection of brittle letters, yellowed with age, tied neatly with a fraying string. "These must have belonged to Grandma," she murmured, her fingers trembling as she lifted the bundle, feeling the weight of history resting in her palm. "Read one," Magnolia urged, practically bouncing on her toes, excitement crackling in the air like static electricity. Willa picked a letter at random, its ink faded, but the sentiment still resonant. "It's dated just after the war," she began, her voice lowering as she read aloud. "Dear Ruth, even in the hardest times, the sun still rises." Ezekiel leaned in closer, captivated by the words as they painted a picture of hope woven through struggle. The room seemed to hold its breath, the dust motes suspended mid-air, like little stars caught in a quiet moment. "See?" he said softly, a hint of awe in his tone. "This place is filled with stories just waiting to be told, just like us." Willa glanced up, her eyes shimmering with unshed tears. "Maybe we can add our story to theirs, huh? A legacy of our own." Magnolia nodded fervently. "And we can start by writing our own letters, to ourselves, to our future, to whoever needs to know they're not alone." As she spoke, the sun dipped lower on the horizon, casting long shadows that danced across the walls, and the air thickened with the scent of nostalgia, mingling with the promise of tomorrow. The old ranch creaked slightly, as if acknowledging their plans and dreams. "Letters, a garden, a feast," Ezekiel murmured, a smile breaking across his face. "What a way to honor the past while shaping our future." Willa looked down at the letters again, her heart swelling with possibility. "Let's do it then. Let's pull this place back from the edge and let it breathe again." Together. With renewed purpose, they set aside the memories, no longer shackled by the ghosts of what was, but buoyed by the weight of what could be. The kitchen seemed to pulse with life, the old items surrounding them, no longer remnants of a forgotten time, but catalysts for their awakening. Outside, the winds carried the fragrance of the impending night, whispering promises of new beginnings and uncharted paths, while the oak tree swayed gently, its branches reaching out as if to bless their endeavors. In that kitchen, with the sun's final rays bathing them in warmth, they were bound by a single thread, a thread of hope that would weave their lives into something extraordinary. Willa set the letters aside, a sense of urgency sparking in her. "We need to capture all this," she declared, glancing around the room as if it were a canvas awaiting her brush. "Every detail." Ezekiel stepped back, his eyes scanning the surroundings. "What about that corner?" He pointed to a dusty shelf lined with jars, each filled with dried herbs and spices, remnants of meals once shared. "Those could be part of the tapestry, too." Magnolia's fingers danced over the jars, tracing their contours. "Like a pantry of memories," she mused, lifting a jar of what appeared to be sage. "This could be our start. What if we blend our own seasonings for the feast?" Willa grinned, her heart racing at the idea. "And we can write down the recipes, not just for the food, but for the stories behind them. Each ingredient a thread in our own fabric." As they gathered around the shelf, the evening shadows deepened, making the room feel like a cocoon, safe and brimming with possibilities. The scent of the herbs, earthy and potent, filled the air, mingling with the lingering warmth of the sun's embrace. It was a heady mix that sparked visions of gathering friends and family, laughter rolling like thunder, each shared meal a promise of connection. Ezekiel reached for a glass jar, the sunlight catching the edges as he turned it over in his hands. "These haven't seen action in years," he mused, a hint of reverence in his voice. "Imagine the stories they hold, the hands that once crafted meals with these." Magnolia nodded, her eyes bright with determination. "Then let's bring them back to life. Let's make a list of what we want to grow in the garden." She began to jot down ideas on an old notepad she found tucked inside the tin box, the pages lined and yellowed, just as the letters were. Willa leaned against the counter, watching Magnolia's fervor with admiration. "You're really on to something, Magnolia. This place deserves to thrive again. We all do." The wind outside shifted, a sudden gust rattling the window panes, as if nature itself was lending its voice to their plans. In that moment, the night felt alive, vibrant with potential, and the oak tree swayed like a guardian, its branches waving in agreement. Ezekiel glanced out the window, where the last slivers of daylight surrendered to the encroaching night, stars beginning to twinkle like promises in the sky. "It's almost like the universe is cheering us on," he said, a smile playing on his lips. "Yeah," Willa agreed, her voice soft with a mix of awe and excitement. "It's not just about reviving the ranch, it's about reigniting our spirits, too." Magnolia paused, her pencil hovering above the paper. "We could even write letters to the stars," she suggested, her gaze shifting upward. "Each one a wish for what we want to grow, for what we want to become." Willa laughed, her heart full. "That's perfect. We'll send our dreams soaring into the night. And who knows, maybe one day they'll come back to us, tangled in the very fabric we're weaving here." As the kitchen filled with their laughter, the old ranch seemed to come alive, a sanctuary reborn, cradling their dreams and weaving them into the quiet tapestry of the universe. With every shared word, every letter written, they stitched the past and future together, one thread at a time, under the watchful gaze of the stars and the whispering winds. The flickering candlelight cast playful shadows against the walls, illuminating the dust motes that danced like spirits in the twilight. Willa swept a hand across the countertop, clearing away the clutter of forgotten trinkets, old coasters, a broken watch, and a faded photograph of a family gathering that seemed to smile back at them with warmth. "Look at this," she said, holding up the photograph, its corners curling with age. "We should honor those who came before us. They built this place, filled it with laughter and love. Their stories deserve to be told." Ezekiel leaned closer, squinting at the faces frozen in time. "Maybe we could add their recipes too, a tribute to the generations who shaped this land." His voice was filled with reverence, as if acknowledging the weight of the past they were about to revive. Magnolia's eyes sparkled, her imagination ignited. "We could create a cookbook, each recipe paired with a story. It could be our way of connecting with them, keeping their legacy alive." She flipped the notepad over, scribbling furiously, her thoughts spilling onto the pages like grains of sand slipping through an hourglass. "Exactly. And we can hold community dinners, invite everyone to share their own tales," Willa added, her excitement bubbling over. "A tapestry woven not just of our own lives, but of all the lives that touched this place." The wind gusted again, and the old shutters rattled, a stark contrast to the warmth within. "Seems like the universe has got its own ideas too," Ezekiel chuckled, holding the shutter still with one hand. "Maybe we should listen to it." Magnolia paused, her pencil hovering in thought, then spoke softly. "What if we gather stories from our neighbors too? The ones who've lived here long enough to know the land like the back of their hand." Willa nodded vigorously. "Yes, a thread from each of us, binding our experiences into one strong fabric. We'll create something that'll stand the test of time." The candle flickered again, its flame dancing in agreement. Ezekiel, ever the dreamer, looked toward the door leading to the backyard, where the moonlight spilled across the garden patch, blanketing it in silver. "We could plant a memory tree, a place where we can tie our hopes, our dreams, our stories. Like wishes on a string," Magnolia said, her voice barely above a whisper, as if the idea held a magic all its own. She drew a small heart beside her notes, envisioning the tree alive with colored ribbons fluttering in the breeze. Willa felt a swell of warmth in her chest, an undeniable sense of purpose filling the air. "Let's do it. We'll gather the stories, plant the tree, and let our threads intertwine. Together, we'll make something beautiful." As they stood amidst the remnants of the past, with dreams swirling around them like the fireflies that would